Hello again, Kin Lane, API Evangelist here for another one of my API Evangelist conversations where I sit down with interesting folks who are doing interesting things with APIs. And let's not waste any time. Let's get them in here and see who they are. Hello, who are you?
Hello, my name is Juan. Nice to be here.
Yeah, what do you do, Juan?
I do a lot of work on JSON Schema. So I'm a TSC member of JSON Schema, and nowadays I also have my own company called Sourcemeta that is completely dedicated to the JSON Schema space and making it easy for companies to use JSON Schema in production.
So why JSON schema? Why is JSON schema so important and interesting to you?
I think coming back to the history, I think I got pretty much accidentally into the rabbit hole. I was working on IoT stuff and I was looking for a way to do more space efficient binary serialization, completely different from the API world. But I started seeing the potential of JSON schema. And once I saw that, and many of the different areas where JSON schema is applicable, including APIs, it got me even more excited. And I think schemas have proven to be the foundational block for so many things, including API governance. So yeah, I think it's just a huge opportunity and a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's you and I connected working at Postman, and I think we connected around. I had started having that realization. I mean, I learned about JSON schema through OpenAPI or specifically Swagger 2.0, and I really learned about JSON schema and the importance of it in the kind of switch to 3.0, OpenAPI 3.0, and then to OpenAPI 3.1. There was a lot of lessons in there for me about the role of JSON schema, what it is, and then it opened my eyes. It's everywhere and it's ubiquitous across organizations. Everybody's using it. Very few people are aware of it. And you've introduced, let's not go down too far into the weeds. I just want to talk about, open it up with your schema registry, which is a pretty simple registry for managing schema. Can you tell a little bit about that and why you built it?
Yeah, sure. So what I've seen a lot is that, I mean, as you're saying, OpenAPI, it's mostly about JSON schema. It can be thought as a thin wrapper around JSON schema to be able to describe APIs. And again, the problem is that a lot of people don't know JSON schema, and they might not really know how to operate JSON schema at large. Like, for example, if you are writing a very simple OpenAPI specification just yourself for a basic API, then life is kind of easy, right? You don't really need to think it through a lot. But as your company grows, you're having lots of APIs, you're trying to govern them all. Maybe you're like have like 100 open API specs. That's where the challenge comes in. Even reusability of a schema, something as simple as that, you see so many people just struggling with it. And that's where the schema registry idea came to be. It's like, can we make something that is really simple to just at least start encouraging all of these things and building on top of that base to then support more advanced use cases?
And then you do some. I mean, I would say for me, there's two aspects of the kind of the stabilizing power of JSON schema and then the awareness that comes with it is one, getting a schema registry, having a source of truth. And you just talked about that. But then can you talk about some of the other tooling that you provide that help manage the versions? Because the version of JSON schema is kind of the second or maybe the first biggest illness I see organizations have is they have different versions of the schema. So can you talk about how you've worked to tackle that?
Yeah, and that's a very important one, and it's pretty interesting. So I've been doing a lot of work through my company on ontologies created with JSON schema, both for data science and APIs, and they face this problem, which I think is very common. Which version of JSON schema am I releasing my set of schemas for? And that's often not a very easy thing to answer. I mean, you would think from one side, oh, just go to the latest, right? That's like kind of the default. But then in many cases where if you have like a big enough audience, not everybody is on latest because of XY reasons. And then you're thinking, okay, maybe I should do the last two, the last three, right? Where I think, I mean, the ideal answer to all of these is like, do you even need to think about it at all? Right. So what I'm trying to create is also tooling that would let you upgrade and downgrade when possible automatically the schemas across versions. So you can just release on the version that you want, and on the fly, you can serve users on different versions out of the box without no thinking. Like for example, and this is coming on the registry. So let's say that you're deploying your schemas on the registry and you are writing them in draft 4 for whatever reason, but then you have a customer that's trying to use them on draft 2012, you can say, okay, give me this schema, but give it to me as 2012, and the schema will, with the registry, will automatically, on the fly, upgrade it to the version that you need. So then the entire versioning problem kind of disappears. We support all of it.
Interesting. Because this is the biggest challenge I encounter with groups. I go in and I talk about how are you using JSON schema, and they may or may not have an awareness of it. Most commonly, people it's a config file for X, whatever tool, and they've learned it through that doorway,
Yeah.
and so they're limited by what that tool supports, whether it's a validation, whether it's a form, whether it's a gateway, whether there's many different reasons. So you're saying, and I hadn't heard that downgrading is acceptable too, like you mentioned, and so it feels like this is about kind of relieving that pressure of that we're kind of shackled to because of the tooling decisions we've made.
Yeah, and just to provide a bit more context on that, we've been looking at the entire schema downgrades in particular on the last Google Summer of Code session on JSON schema. One of the projects was exactly about this, and we did a lot of work on mainly upgrading, but we did a huge amount of preliminary work on what downgrading would look like. And to our surprise, and to be honest, to my surprise as well, I was the mentor of that project. We find out that there was an extremely surprising amount of stuff that we could downgrade, more than you would think, to the point that now I'm changing my mind a bit, and I'm like, well, actually, downgrading is feasible to an enormous amount of cases.
Yeah, and I got a pretty healthy dose of the complexity and I would say power and industrial grade capabilities of JSON schema, running the team at Postman, which had a bunch of the people who were moving forward the spec and helping move things forward. And I know how my skills are, I would say, are pretty basic and fundamental as far as my understanding. And so I think downgrading the schema, but also our expectations of people's understanding of it, as well as the tooling adoption helps. But it helps onboard people with the role that it plays. And then we can maybe play catch up, whether it be the tooling, their education, the draft of the spec, and we can move it forward in different ways. But can you, from your perspective, I mean, you're for the foremost expert on JSON schema. Can you explain to people like how it's used as part of Open API? Because I don't think people grasp that.
Yes, I mean, OpenAPI, as well as many other specifications like Async API, Ramo as well, the W3C Web of Things, and so many other specifications you probably never heard of, they are building on top of JSON Schema. JSON Schema is a foundational general purpose language to allow you to describe and validate JSON data. Very, very general, right? It doesn't assume anything about the use case. And all of these higher level specifications like OpenAPI are taking on that, and they are, in a way, repurposing JSON Schema for that specific use case. So a good way to think of it is like OpenAPI is a thin wrapper around JSON schema to let you use JSON schema to describe APIs. But at the core of it, 80%, 90% of it is actually just JSON schema. That's what you're using.
Yeah, it's a really fundamental, super important reason why you should be using OpenAPI 3.1 and not 3.0 or 2.0 Swagger. It's a really, it'll stabilize and make such a big difference in the way your organization operates. And I don't care how you see JSON schema or OpenAPI for that matter, whether it's validation, whether it's defining it, whether it's docs security, whatever your reason for creating that open API, having that fundamental underlying JSON schema understanding is super critical, super important to you move forward, even aside from open API, because like you said, it's used across probably a bunch of other specs that you're using. So zooming out from the tooling, from the spec, I want to understand Sourcemeta. Like, why did you create this entity? What's your plans? What's your focus? What are you doing?
Well, I mean, the mission of the company is help people actually use and unleash the power of JSON schemas. You're saying JSON schema is so foundational, but I feel, and this is like a personal thing that I'm like scratching my own itch. People are not able to unleash this power, and I've seen this power myself when I was working on IoT space efficient satellite data transfer, there was a point where it clicked like, this is really powerful stuff. And I want everybody else to be able to get that same power I got. And I felt that the ecosystem out there, the tooling, the resources, is not there by far. So the goal of the company is actually to get there. So we have many different products, both free and also some enterprise ones that we're building, but we're trying to get we're trying to cover this entire problem space. So ranging from education, we maintain and we own the learnjsonschema.com website that a lot of people are relying on. We're shooting a premium video course on JSON schema for people to learn a lot of these. We're building a standard library of JSON schema concepts so that you can more easily assemble stuff. We have a high performance validator for some very high throughput finance use cases. We have a JSON schema CLI for managing ontologies of schemas. And then we're developing some enterprise offerings like the schema registry to be able to host your own source of truth at your organization. So we're trying to cover this entire space. I think when we do that, people are starting to see that through some of the good tooling that we have. It gives you power, and it gives you power to do so much more and so much more easily with the schemas, and that's the core of it.
I'm super thankful you're here, because when I mean, we connected at Postman around a lot of these, and then I spent a year rolling out governance, and I'm I'm willing to say 70% of the issues, challenge, friction I encountered across API operations and things that held me back from being as successful as I could with API governance were schema related, and specifically JSON schema related. I was just floored at the instability, unreliability, inconsistency, all the things you can't put your finger on it. They were schema issues, and they were trickling up downstream in ways I never imagined, to the
Yes.
point where I'm before we even start talking open API, before we start talking governance, any group that I work with, I push to teach schema, basic schema literacy and fundamentals, because it is that important. But when you go into these organizations, and I'll pick on a different one that I worked at a few years ago, is I went in and inventoried. They have 3,200 objects to run this software that they do, created over 15 years, and by many different hundreds of programmers and engineers, and they needed to inventory and stabilize them. But things are moving fast, things are crazy, teams don't have the awareness. So if I'm an enterprise of that scale and I want to start bringing these superpowers you talk about, where do I start?
Yeah, and you cannot start at the moment, and that's what I've seen. All of the challenges that you're describing, that's what I've seen as well. And I think they're split into two groups. First, as you said, is literacy. Most people don't even again know that JSON schema is a thing, and even the ones that know, they cannot learn it properly because actually there is not a place to actually learn it properly, right? The people that, for example, in the TSC like myself, we learn it the hard way, like banging our heads against the wall and reading the specifications a million times and trying to come up with our own implementations and facing our own problems and asking a trillion questions. We went to the hard path. You cannot expect everybody to go there. There is no resource at the moment. So that's one side, right? Learnjsonschema.com, something like video course, my O'Reilly book. But then the other side is that even if you learn, let's assume that you have the resources to learn JSON schema and be a pro JSON schema developer. Even when you get there, you're going to find that the tooling is actually going to set you back because the ecosystem is completely fragmented. You have non-compliance tooling that leads people to write invalid schemas, like we've seen with Spectral, for example, pretty recently. And that's just another massive mountain you have to climb. And I'm also trying to fix that, right? Like either to the end user or to the company building an offering on top of JSON Schema or Open API. Ideally, the best JSON Schema foundational tool that you can get, you're going to find it at Sourcemeta.
Yeah, and the tooling uh, leaves a lot to be desired in the space sometimes, technically, performance wise, support wise, roadmap wise. And can you talk a little bit about the work you've done? I'm realizing this working with vacuum versus spectral as far as rules, and then switching from AJV to using your tooling. I'm seeing it again. Can you talk to us a little bit about the work that's gone into performance of your tooling?
Yes, performance has been a big one. Again, lots of people use JSON schema or want to use JSON schema for validation on production services. For example, API gateways or overall APIs, like for example, Fastify. Everybody using Fastify is using JSON schema to validate requests. That's like the default that they offer. So what you see is that a lot of companies would complain that schema validation on their APIs is taking a huge amount of compute, and either it means that they are paying for that compute, or they just completely disable that. It was like, oh, this is too expensive, mainly on high throughput, for example, financial cases. So that led into a fun research line of mine. It's a project called Blaze. We're actually going to be publishing a paper about it soon, but it's all built in the open, so you can go take a look. It's an enterprise-ready C++ JSON schema validator, extremely high performance. The paper is claiming Blaze to be the most high performance validator out there by at least 10x than the other ones. It can provide validation time even down to the nanosecond range, which is completely not seen before in the JSON schema space. And proving that JSON schema, yes, can be complex, but if you take the effort and writing good tooling, what you can squeeze out of it, it's enormous.
Yeah, I'm super impressed with where I think you kind of hit squeezed out all the performance you can, and then a few days later or weeks later, you've squeezed out some more. So I'm super
Yes.
impressed with your ability to do this. Um, how do people get involved with what you're doing and find you?
Definitely take a look at sourcemeta.com. That's the main website where I'm posting all the offerings, and you can even see some hints of what I'm also working on the website. But definitely connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm posting lots of updates on LinkedIn. And in general, again, we're offering a lot of products, and we're also offering consulting help with JSON Schema. We're getting involved with a lot of companies just getting into the weeds and seeing the challenges firsthand. And that's the inspiration for a lot of our tooling. So yeah, that's another way to get engaged.
Yeah, can't encourage it enough. Thanks, Juan. I appreciate you coming by today and talking with me.
Same, it was a pleasure. And yeah, thanks a lot for having me.
All right, until next time. All right. Yeah, I cannot urge enough before you go invest too much in your APIs, your design first, your code first, your governance, your testing, your sandboxes, everything depends on you having your schema house in order. I can't encourage it enough. Schema literacy, just get your teams the fundamentals, tooling wise, understanding of the different drafts. It's super important, and you're going to find that it just stabilizes your operations in some amazing ways. So definitely reach out to Juan. They're building, they're the front line of everything that's going on right now when it comes to schema. I highly recommend it. All righty, till next time, y'all. Thanks.